Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, and good morning. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us here today. We're going to go ahead and officially call the meeting to order. And let's proceed with a roll call so that we know who is here with us from the task force. This is Lydia Smith from Violence Free Colorado.
Stacey Campbell with Campbell Litigation in the Chamber.
Judith Marquez with Knife 5 Colorado, Worker Advocate spot.
Dana Haygood with USAA.
Tara McKinnish with the University of Colorado.
Jared Make, A Better Balance.
Edwin
Manning.
Manning.
Oh, I'm sorry, Edwin. Hadley Manning, Independent Women's Forum.
Sandra Parker Murray, Communication Workers of America.
Kathy White, the Colorado Fiscal Institute.
Diana Petrak, Colorado Policy Pathways.
John Bartley, Department of Personnel and Administration.
Monica Cortez Bangster, Department of Personnel and Administration.
Jeff Fitzgerald with Colorado Department of Labor and Employment.
Admira Marcus with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment.
Pat Teagarden and Cher Haven, Colorado Department of Labor and Employment.
This is Greg Balomo. The only other task force member I know who's on the line is Joe Barella.
Yes, this is Joe Barella with CDLE.
How about Kevin? Are you out there? All right. All right. The first item on the agenda is for Tommy from CDPHE to give us a quick overview of their findings of an accelerated research effort into the health impacts of paid family and medical leave. And then Tommy will make herself available for about 20 minutes for question and answer from the task force. So Jeff, could you pull up Tommy's presentation, please?
Should be loaded.
I'm still seeing the agenda.
Okay, give me a sec. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Here we go.
Great. Thanks, everybody, and thanks so much for your time. My name is Tommy Keel, and I'm the Interpersonal Violence Prevention Unit Supervisor at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And we are happy to provide this report to you all on the health benefits of paid family and medical leave. Next slide, please. Am I able to get down? Oops. Perfect. So for those of you that have had a chance to look at it, the way we organized this report was to initially look very specifically at any research that had a direct link between paid family leave and health benefits. And we had reached out to you all early on to kind of find out what topics or what areas or outcomes you were interested in learning more about. And some of those were health benefits, some of those were some other things, which we tried to cover later on in the report if there was some literature. But the narrow focus of health benefits, we were able to find varying levels of evidence. And the way we defined evidence and quantified it was if something was considered strong if there was a systematic review that contains several high-quality studies or 4 or more peer-reviewed journals or research articles. And that criteria was met by the following health outcomes. So reduced infant mortality, increased breastfeeding, increased immunizations, and improved maternal mental health. So that was our strongest level of evidence. We had moderate evidence, which consisted of 2 or 3 peer-reviewed research articles for improved maternal and infant sleep, improved child health, and reduced intimate partner violence. Excuse me. And then we had limited research, which was considered 1 peer-reviewed research article for improved maternal physical health. We looked at things related to elder caregiving, and there is not as much evidence out there related to that. So we were limited a bit by the studies that currently exist. So it's not to say that it doesn't have a health benefit, it's just that we didn't have evidence to support that at this time. Next slide. We also looked at secondary health benefits of paid family leave. So these were things that were cited in the literature to likely be associated with paid family leave, but they were not the main lever that was actually evaluated. So, for example, reduced risk of child abuse and neglect. There was lots of associations in the literature that increasing breastfeeding would potentially reduce child abuse and neglect, as well as reduce parental stress was a mechanism to reduce child abuse and neglect. So not directly paid family leave, though there were studies that said or hypothesized that access to paid family leave may reduce parental stress and increase breastfeeding. We also saw that there were secondary benefits related to mother's health related to developing heart disease, breast cancer, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and ovarian cancer. And the mechanism there really was, again, related to breastfeeding, and that those outcomes would potentially increase maternal health outcomes. And third, we looked at infant health, and that was related to lowering the risk of respiratory tract infections, childhood leukemia, type 1 and 2 diabetes, sudden infant death syndrome, and asthma. And this was related, again, indirectly through paid family leave, but directly through parental attachment and reduced pregnancy-related depression, which there was some associations and hypothesis that both of those things were related to accessing paid family leave. Next slide. We also looked at some of the literature related to the social and economic benefits. And again, these were not as clear links to paid family leave, though there was some hypotheses around a connection between these outcomes, or there was not enough research to warrant it being in the categories of studies that we had found. For example, California has had a lot of research done around their paid family leave and medical program, and so some of these findings are related to California's findings. So those outcomes are health benefits that not health benefits, these are economic benefits, were improved economic stability for families, improved women's growth after paid leave, decreased poverty and dependence on public resources, improved educational outcomes for children of parents with access to paid family leave. And that specific one is related to other countries that have had paid family leave for a while. And then decreased nursing home use was an outcome found in California from their program. Next slide. Additionally, we saw things that were relevant to the employer, such as reduced work-family conflict, improved employee morale, reduced employee burnout, increased worker productivity, improved outcomes for small businesses. Again, this came from New Jersey and California's studies, and then reduced turnover costs. Next slide. So our overarching conclusions from the report were that it was difficult to assess health benefits of national or state level policies because it's not possible to do a randomized control trial about public policy. So that's one of the limitations. But despite that, there were still several health outcomes that had really strong associations between the health outcome and paid family leave. There's little research on the benefits of paid family leave for families caring for older relatives through access to paid family leave. And it's an area that needs some more digging into or some more research conducted on. And that finally, when we looked and examined the health benefits for the varying amounts of time, that a minimum of 12 weeks was really what was recommended by experts in the field. You'll also note in the report that we looked and analyzed and summarized each of the different states that currently have paid family leave and what it looks like at the back of the report. Next slide. So that's a real high-level summary of the report we produced, and I'm happy to answer any questions or take any feedback. Thanks for your time.
Tommy, this is Stacy Campbell with Campbell Litigation, and I'm looking at the slide where you were talking about may have social and economic benefits for the employer. and you say improved outcomes for small businesses. Can you expand on that a bit?
Yep, let me pull that up quick. I can say more specifically.
While Tommy's looking for that, I just want to make sure everybody has a copy of the full report. It's 35 pages. I distributed it yesterday around 3 p.m. If anybody doesn't have that, ping me.
And so, Stacy, thank you for your question. It was basically the studies from New Jersey and California where it showed that 70% of small businesses supported paid family leave, and that in New Jersey, the majority of businesses did not report increased overtime costs to paid family leave, despite having significantly fewer staff. And then in California, small and medium-sized businesses reported more positive outcomes than larger businesses.
And is there like a specific area in the report that you are that you could point me to? And if you could send me an email later if you don't have it right now.
Yeah, it's actually, the section is the social and economic benefits, which start on page 16, and the specific business section actually starts on page 20 of the report.
Thank you.
And this is Diana Petrak. Do you have the footnote that specifies the study or the survey that information came from? Because I'd be interested in the sample size.
Yes, we have the footnotes listed on each page for all of the references that we have, and there's over, I think, like 200 of them. So they're listed at the bottom of each page of the report. I'm happy to share any if you want access to any of these reports and they're not available, I'm happy to share them as well.
Sorry, Tomei, did you say that there's 200 reports in the footnotes? Is that what you're saying?
I think there's over 200 references that we used. I think was the total.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, this is Dana Haygood. You said that one of the questions that was asked small employers was that they didn't have an increase in, did you say overtime costs?
Correct. Mm-hmm. So that was in New Jersey specifically, that they didn't see that happen for small businesses, even though they had less staff.
So in terms of bringing in staff to augment, they didn't see an increase in overtime.
Yep, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Tommy, this is Hadley Manning. Oh, sorry. I think I interrupted somebody, but I just had a quick question. Thank you for this report. It's very helpful. Did the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment did you investigate at all or find any association with demand for abortion and paid family medical leave?
So there was, and I remember you had asked us to look into this. There is not any studies that we could find that specifically looked into it. There's one study that looked at abortion rates across the United States, and it was before FMLA was passed, and then after, and they saw a decrease related to that, but it's not specific to paid family leave. So we did not see that in the U.S. context, and there's not enough states that have had that where it's been examined. So we were not able to find anything specific to that.
Okay. That's interesting about FMLA though. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And I'm happy to send you that study if you would like it as well.
Yeah, I like to take a look at it. Thank you.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
This is Edwin So with Zomama. Tommy, I do have a question regarding the study that cited small businesses. And in that study, what was the definition for small businesses in terms of size?
I have to go back and look at the details of that. And it was specific to New Jersey's context in California, and I'm not sure if they define them differently, but could get that information too.
Yeah, please do. Thank you.
Sure.
This is Lydia. And thank you so much for the study and specifically looking around research around safe leave. I noticed that that came back as moderate when we looked at specific health outcomes, but I didn't see, and I'm wondering if this was something that was was talked about in terms of like economic justice or women's relation to poverty was also part of the search for some of those articles and things.
Yeah, so that's actually listed in the economics section because we couldn't make an argument. You can make an argument, but there wasn't a direct health outcome that was more focused on a social or economic kind of indicator, even though we know there's health outcomes related to that. And we actually have that in the social and economic section where we talk about implications from a social justice kind of perspective.
Right. In terms of those support factors, also reducing incidences of IPV as well. So
yeah, there's tangential, they weren't what the criteria that we used was pretty strict in terms of for health benefits, only looking at where it specifically was looking at paid family leave. And there's just a very limited research that actually does that. But what you're talking about, there's a lot more research where it kind of looks at these tangential or connections or these associations. And that's because the criteria was pretty strict in terms of what we deemed the evidence of paid family and medical leave. We didn't include it in that initial section.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Tommy. This is Kathy White at the Colorado Fiscal Institute. Thanks for this report. It's really interesting and wonderful. And I have a lot of footnotes to start going through and reading. but one of the things that I was curious about is if, and through the look at the health benefits, if there was any attention paid to the sort of gender neutrality of a policy. So like, were there benefits that you saw if it was a gender neutral policy, meaning so that men were as encouraged, or maybe new fathers were as encouraged to take bonding time with their babies, and if that had a consequent effect on maternal health?
Yeah, we actually found quite a bit of information around paternal mental health, but the studies didn't meet the criteria of having been peer reviewed, or we did see in California, for example, that I think it was increases in men requesting family leave had increased by like 400% over the time period. And there's a section, I believe we kept it in here, and I'm just trying to make sure. We looked at a lot of different research. Let's see. Yeah, so there's a section about a more gender balanced society on page 17, where we looked a little bit at that. There's a lot less information about the impact on men, just more broadly, though there's some beginning studies, but they haven't been as fully vetted as some of the things.
Families, medical leave for families caring for older relatives. I was one diagnosed each year. I'm surprised that there was just not more research on that, people having to take
across, again, with that really strict criteria that we were using to find articles that were really looking at that. And it may be that it's difficult to access for older adults to actually have time off in a consistent way to use that. I think there was a study, and I'll have to double check this, in California, where it just indicated that it was difficult. They had less staff taken off for that use. Like the majority of the request for paid family leave was for a newborn and less for older adult care. And I think they have to look into that a little bit more about what that reason is. But we tried to find some information related to that and didn't have a lot of luck.
Tommy, this is Stacy Campbell again, and can you talk to us a little bit, if it applied, about the definition of family and how it impacted the report? And I'm really wanting to see if there were any impacts. I mean, I know we've been talking, it seems like we've been talking about kind of mom, dad, the child, somewhat older adults, but what about, we've got kind of this expanded definition of family, and did that come into the study any?
Yeah, it was difficult to tease that out. In the back, starting on page 24, we talk about each of the different states in the U.S. that have passed this and the different criteria for eligibility, which it varies from state to state. that was difficult to tease out. And then if you introduce, other countries that have it passed, their contexts are different as well and definitions. So that was harder to do, and we weren't able to do that with this report.
Okay, thank you.
Tommy, this is Dana Haygood. I'm having a little trouble hearing some folks talk, not with the connection, just there's, for some reason, the clarity is just not there. So if this question's been asked, I apologize. But were you able to get additional information on, with the definition of family, having it be a little bit broader with folks who've been through domestic abuse? Any comments about how that's going, percentage of people using it for domestic abuse, anything along those lines?
Yeah, we were not able to find that data specifically.
Hi, Tame. This is Judith with Minecraft, Colorado. Again, thank you for all your work. I have a question in regards to if you can just expand on the better workplace culture on page 18, industry, around reduced work-family conflict and improved employee morale. It's saying that the U.S. has a higher level of work-family conflict than any other developed country in the world. So that's really interesting fact. And like, how does paid leave, support that?
Yeah, and this is really framed around sort of that conflict between family priorities and workplace priorities and having to make decisions or choose between the two. And in other developed countries, they do have access, the majority of them have access to paid family leave. So it was making the argument that, the U.S. is just at a heightened stress because we don't have access to paid family leave. You have to make a choice sort of between those conflicting demands of work and family. And that's really what that report was talking about. And then, the stress and cost of stress related to workplace stress and then hospitalization rates and things like that.
Oh, what was that? What kind of rates?
There was some data that looked at 60% of employees report getting sick from workplace stress, and 7% of employees report hospitalization as a result of workplace stress. And we have footnotes for those as well.
Tommy, this is Stacy Campbell again. In your conclusion, you say a minimum of 12 weeks of paid family medical leave recommended. And how did you kind of get there?
Yeah, so if you look on the report, we actually talk about each of the different amounts. So we do 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and 12 weeks. It's starting on page 26 in the report. And it basically synthesizes the research findings for each of those amounts of time. And basically what it lands on is that at a minimum, which is a recommendation of the American Public Health Association, American Academy of Pediatrics, and the Pediatric Policy Council, that 12 weeks be the minimum. And so that last part of the report really walks you through the varying pros and cons of the amounts of time at each of those levels. And then fundamentally, sort of the main people in this realm have recommended 12 weeks. We couldn't look at other countries where they've offered between 13 and 82 weeks. It's not on the table and it wasn't relevant. So this is specific to the U.S. context.
And it's Stacy Campbell again as a follow-up. So was there, and I've got, thank you for pointing me to the page, but did your research show if you had 16 weeks where there was a kind of an improvement in the things that you say would benefit from paid family medical leave, and or if it was 6 weeks that there would be a drop-off in those benefits? Was that part of it?
Yeah, so if you look at each of the paragraphs, it sort of lays out, here's what happens at 6 weeks that's positive, but here's also what doesn't happen at 6 weeks and what can be challenging, and sort of lays out the pros and cons for each of the amounts of time based on what the research said.
Okay, thank you. I'll read those pages.
Great.
And Tommy, I'm sorry, you said the definition for the minimum 12-week recommended was page 26?
Yeah, it starts on page 26 and goes through page 29.
Thank you.
Hi, Tommy. This is Jared from A Better Balance. One question that I had was how you looked at the distinctions between medical leave and family leave for bonding purposes in terms of some of the studies and recommendations because I did notice the table in other states only reflected the family leave portion and bonding, although some of the descriptions talked about how there's additional time, sometimes up to 26 or 52, many weeks for personal disability leave, which for a parent who is giving birth could include pregnancy-related complications and then the actual recovery from childbirth. So just curious how that kind of factored into your research review.
And in relation to parental bonding, or?
Right, to the parental bonding and then some of the recommendations about time off to bond with the child, but recognizing that, there is also, for some new parents, a recovery time.
Yeah, and I think that really showed up. It's probably why improved maternal mental health and physical health were higher up and some of the health outcomes that were examined for that reason. I wouldn't say that we were able to get into the weeds with the research in the way that you just described. It doesn't cleanly kind of pan out.
Hey team, this is Greg just butting in. We are at the amount of time that we had. Other questions for her?
Greg, I think this will be a quick question. This is Hadley Manning again. Tommy, in your research, did you guys come across?
I thought there was things. Yeah, there's things related to infant mortality rates, and I don't know if that's specifically what you meant or something else.
I just mean in terms of like family size. So in some other countries that have created or expanded paid family medical leave, it's been kind of partially in response to declining fertility rate, or?
Yeah, we did not see that. That's an interesting question. There may be something out there, but it didn't come across for our purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Tamay. My question, I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on like the length of leave and what is best, and it's just around like regard to your research around sick decline and the overall health and increased risk for depression. So that's like with fewer than 8 weeks, they will actually see. I was wondering if you could expand on the 6 weeks versus 8 or 10, or just what is really the significance about the differences.
Yeah, and I couldn't speak to that the longer time that you get to actually to access vaccinations, to take care of your mental health, to breastfeed, which releases kind of all these healthy things. Already are offered 12 weeks of unpaid leave through FMLA, and they are able to physically recover at 12 weeks in ways that they couldn't at 10, 8, or 6 weeks. So there are some benefits for each of the amounts of time, but some of those benefits are outweighed with some of the risks that you mentioned, for example, like at the 8-week amount of time. Does that help, Judith?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Tommy?
Yes, Edwin Zoe with Zoe Mama. Hey, Tommy, and regarding the length of leave for bonding, the conversation has centered around 4, 6, 8, and 12, 8, 10, and 12. Yet I think there's actually a report I mentioned. I think Canada saw very positive results when they increased from 26 to 52 or something like that. Is that correct?
Repeat that last part again.
Canada increased their periods significantly and saw positive results based on the report you provided. Is there a reason why the conversation is not talking about in those ranges?
Yeah, so we made the decision for this report because there is no state that's offering, there's no model where they're offering more than 12 weeks currently, or that has been implemented. And so that's why we just focused this to the US context when looking at the difference in outcomes, just because we thought it would be clear, just because there's such variation from the US and other countries that offer paid family leave.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, Tommy, thank you very much. We really appreciate not just the report, but you making yourself available today. Is it possible that if the group has additional questions, we can send them to you via email and then funnel the answers back?
Absolutely, and I will follow up on the 2 questions that I said I would and get that information to you all so you can send it out as well.
Excellent.
Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, all. So our next topic of conversation is public comment. And Admira, if you wouldn't mind, just give kind of a quick recap of the emails over the last couple of days and what the sum total of comments we're looking at. And then I think we should engage in conversation around those with folks kind of highlighting the specific comment or comments that they would like to share.
Sure. Thanks, Greg. So as you saw in the emails that I sent out since yesterday, we had a couple of emails that came in during the public comment period that just during the printing and scanning process were cut off or weren't included, which I sent out yesterday and today. And then I also received an email from an organization that collected comments using what appears to have been an email, or at least what they reported was an email forwarding service. So they had shared my email address, but through a forwarding service that was then forwarding emails in batches. And when they went through the comments that I'd received the majority except for 5. And I did search through my full inbox just to make sure that I'd collected everything that I'd actually received, and those 5 never made it to me. But I did verify that based on the timestamps of that the organization sent in, that they were in fact submitted to that email forwarding service in time, so I should have technically received them. So I included them and I forwarded them to you this morning so that you could take a look at them. They've also been published on the website. Everything that I've attached in the last 2 days has been published on the website. And if there's anything else that comes in terms of questions about any other comments from any other organizations, I'll continue to research and make sure that I receive everything that was intended to be sent and forwarded to you. But based on everything that I've received thus far, I've updated our totals. And just to give you an overview, based on the new totals over what was discovered in the last couple of days, there is now a total of 753 comments that were received between August 25 and September 25.
Thanks, Admira, and thanks so much for your diligent work on this and everybody who's been supporting you on that. All right, so open conversation. Who'd like to get us kicked off related to public comments? And recall that we'll be taking about another 20 minutes on the topic today, but that we have 45 minutes on the 15th as well. Anybody wish to share a comment on the public comments that we've received, the 753 rather?
Yes, this is Judith with 9-5. So, these are a lot of comments, so I think it just demonstrates how important, this conversation is for Colorado. And I did review every single one and kind of tallied them up. Again, like for 9-5, I think that the voice of the community is so important. And so it was really important to get a gauge of, I think that Admira's amazing work, helped compile, kind of the breakdown around worker comments and, worker voices and employer voices. And as you can see, there's a lot of workers that did respond and spoke about their need for paid family and medical leave. And so in my tally, I gather that about 80% of the comments that came in were in support of a paid family medical leave program. They either were talking about, sharing experiences of not having paid leave and their impacts, or sharing different components like supporting the family definition, making it accessible for all workers, having strong job protection, wage replacement. Also, many comments did come in stating that they want a strong paid family medical leave program. I thought that, again, there was just a variety of voices, you know, that submitted a public comment, from, you know, Boulder County Health to, you know, a myriad of policy reasons from the Colorado Law and Policy, you know, the Colorado Women's Foundation, the nonprofit association. So, and also so many business voices that all weighed in. And I think some things that I just want to highlight as well are that I think it's really, really interesting that the Boulder County, they actually already offer a pretty expensive paid family medical leave program that is parental but also medical for over 2,000 employees, and that they're actually in support of a paid family medical leave program. So I think that that's very powerful, that an employer that already, you know, provides a robust program is still in support of a paid family medical leave, and that they have seen that there's positive retention for their employees, and just a lot of, you know, I think how Tame was saying, a lot of health impacts for their workers overall. So I think that was very interesting, as well as I think another really powerful, at least for me, comment came from a faith organization, I believe, and that they are, you know, as a faith-based person, that they support an inclusive definition or a family. Basically, they support including all types of family, not just the traditional model. So I think that also was very interesting, that a faith-based organization supports including all types of families. And I think that Together Colorado also included a sign-on letter of over 100, I believe, congregations and churches across Colorado that are in support of a strong paid family medical leave program. So I think I was very encouraged by just the varied voices and different that came out.
Thanks, Judith. Who else would like to share what you saw in the many, many public comments?
This is Kathy. I just wanted to echo what Judith said. I was really struck by the need, right? That there were a lot of people who at some point in their lives, and from all over the state, who have needed to take paid leave, and either they have had some access to paid leave or they have not. And I was really struck by the people that didn't have access to paid leave and who are still sort of like how long it took them to recover financially from that sort of economic strain. You know, a lot of the comments were, you know, people needed to take the time off. They ended up taking the time off because they needed it, and then just had to kind of roll with the punches and suffer the financial hardships of not having pay during that time period, maybe losing their jobs as a result of that time period, and how much longer it takes. Like this is kind of like a short time, whether we're talking about 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks, but that the people, they take the leave that they need, and then it can take them, you know, months to years to recover from not having access to pay during those periods of time that, you know, are stressful. Having a baby is a stressful thing, you know. Getting sick is stressful. Caring for a loved one is stressful. And so, you know, you do it, and just the lingering effects, I think, just really demonstrated to me a lot of the need and why it's so important that we get this right.
Thanks, Kathy. Who else would like to chip in?
This is Sandra Parker Murray, Communication Workers of America. I was reading one letter in particular from one of our collective bargaining agreement units, United Commercial Food Workers, and one of the VPs there spoke about having this leave as a protection, but not having to lose what we already have through collective bargaining agreements. And if the
Sarah,
workers
Sandra?
would be immediately, yes,
Sorry to interrupt. It's just I can't hear you clearly. I'm not sure if you have like headphones on, or it sounds a little muffled.
Okay. Let's see.
It may also help. We've got 9 folks who have not muted their phones. If you all could just tap at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a tap at the bottom of the screen. You should see something come up that says turn off microphone. I think that'll help quite a bit.
Okay. Is that better? I took it off.
Yes. It's much clearer. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So anyway, her letter was about having a program that would provide a floor that collective bargaining agreements can raise from what they already have, and that the some contracts, some collective bargaining agreements never expire, but they're constantly extended, and the fear is that those new protections or laws will not be, I guess, considered in a bargaining agreement if it's 5 or 10 years out before they renegotiate agreement, and if that once these laws are passed, then those workers are able to have access to all of these protections, even though there is a collective bargaining agreement already in place. Hope that makes sense.
I want to make sure that I understood what you were saying, Sandra. Basically, that if a law is to be created, it would still be relevant to people who are in a long-term collective bargaining agreement. In other words, if the agreement is still in force, it would not take precedent over the law.
Yes, if it provides a higher standard of protections and leave legislation than what is already in the bargaining agreement.
Okay, thanks. Who else would like to chip in on the public comments?
This is Diana Petrak, and I find it a little bit overwhelming to pick out just a few of the priority of the points made in the comments. There were so many good ones. But I would urge people to take advantage of the fact that the public comments are posted on the FAMLI website, because there are some comments that really do go into quite a lot of detail. A lot of practitioners and employers are bringing up, none of them deny that that there's some potential benefits to paid family leave, but as practitioners, I think they see risks that could emerge over time and have secondary and third order consequences that I don't think we should ignore, because they won't go away, those risks. They pop up somewhere. And there was a detailed comment by Miller Coors, let's see here, ACLI, American Council of Life Insurers. As I say, there were some terrific comments from various business coalitions that if you pull out the themes, there were several themes, and I'm sure that everyone could add to this conversation, but aligning with FMLA to prevent confusion and complexity, the definition of a family member, and opt-out options, market options. There were so many suggestions that were general themes that were throughout all of the comments. One comment I found particularly interesting too was the value of education and support and the coordination of benefits that happen when employers are managing their own benefits plans that we don't want to risk, because that is going to make it harder on employees to manage their own leave. So I'm sure there'll be an opportunity to talk more, but those were my first thoughts.
Thanks, Diana.
Hi, this is Jared from A Better Balance. I think following up on Diana's comments, there were so many comments to go through, so I agree it's hard to kind of distill them, the takeaway themes. I do think, among the employer comments, which of course are so valuable to review and to have that perspective, there were definitely threads, some of which were confusion about how a social insurance program of this nature works, and what it means for larger employers who might already be providing benefits. So I do look forward in our upcoming meetings to discussing a bit more some of the mechanics of how this works that provide certain safeguards and would address some of the confusion and concerns. I think overall, and having worked on this issue in other states as well, just like the presentation that we just heard, the research does show that many of the initial concerns raised by the business community are unfounded. The sky hasn't fallen in the states where this has been implemented, and a lot of the research showing that this, has benefits in terms of employee retention, productivity, and a lot of business support after the fact once this is in place. And again, I look forward to discussing some of the reasons why that's the case, in addition to what some of the mechanics and features of the other social insurance programs that have led to those outcomes which have been established by research on the states that have done this. I do want to point out as well, and I think some of this came through in some of the forum comments from employers. You definitely see from some folks just a clear reaction to business, to government having no role in business. Definitely a lot of comments saying the government should stay out of business in our affairs. And, as a workers' rights advocate, someone appointed in a workers' rights seat, I would point to the many incredible needs for government intervention, whether we're talking about non-discrimination, whether we're talking about access to core benefits and rights, all of the laws that have protected workers, showing the value and the need. And then finally, I would just add that, again, that is taken against the many worker comments that, to Kathy's point, show an incredible need, the real high costs of not having anything in place now. There's so many comments to choose from, but there was one that struck me again this morning when I was looking back over them, from an individual in Fort Collins who wrote, I'm a US citizen, I'm a woman, a mother, student, daughter, sister, and a friend. I've personally gone through facing financial hardships because when I got pregnant, I wasn't offered any paid leave or any FMLA benefits. I had to go on government assistance to get by, scraping change, losing our car, getting utilities shut off, and the list goes on. And that's a theme in hundreds of worker comments about the tremendous consequences of not having job protected paid time off for these purposes, and is something that really is quite critical that we think about, particularly in response to some, and certainly not all. There was also supportive employer comments, but from some who say government has no role here.
Thanks, Jared.
This is Diana Petrak, and I would challenge a little bit the comment that you have read that government should just stay out of our affairs. That wasn't really what I heard. I heard more that we just need to tread carefully and make sure that as we construct this program, we recognize that making it complex and the implementation of it could leave a lot of, I'm not articulating this very well, but a lot of, unintended harm on employees and employers. And I don't think that's what any of us want.
Yeah, and this is Jared from A Better Balance, just to follow up on that, Diana. I definitely am not suggesting that that was the key takeaway from employers. I was responding to the fact that there were many comments, and again, we're talking about hundreds, so there were many that said, government get out of business affairs altogether. That was a comment that reappeared. I do think to the broader concerns that you're raising about being careful, I do think we have, the benefit of looking to the states that have already passed and implemented this, and there are many features that have been shown, and all of the research suggests to both help employers, help workers, again, given the critical need for this, and with pretty significant social consequences that I don't want to lose sight of either. The comment that I read also refers to folks having to go on public assistance and some of the costs to the larger community and government from folks who are forced, whether it's on public assistance and either other programs that have been shown, and this again was also mentioned in the health impact study from the state, to show that reliance on public assistance goes down. So all to say, there were so many comments, so many threads to pull, but I do think that many of the business comments that were raised were things that we could look to the other states, we could look to the research, and also address some of the confusion that I saw in a number of comments about the actual law and how the laws work in other states.
Thanks, Jared. Hey, everybody, we only have 3 minutes left. I want to be respectful of your all's calendar. I suspect that you squeeze this in between 2 other things. We're going to continue the conversation on public comment in our next meeting, which is 3:30 to 5 p.m. on October 15th. That's just going to be a teleconference, same format as this one. On October 17th is our next in-person meeting. That's nearly an all-day affair. And we will go ahead and continue conversation on the factors for the majority of the time, then hear a presentation from Pinnacle, basically outlining what it is that they shared, and then we'll do a bit of planning for the next agenda. So orienting ourselves related to our next upcoming milestone, though, we're going to have the actuary from AMI visit with us on the 15th. So questions you have around whether, how they view things, how they can model things, etc., please bring those. They've graciously made themselves available for 45 minutes. And then we're going to see what portion of the meeting on the 17th we can get them for, so that as we get close to our November 1st deadline for specific input to the actuary on what we want them to model, we are as precise and realistic in our ask as we can be. Then the last thing I'll say before turning it back to Lydia is you're going to see a request coming out to you to identify time periods for meetings in November and December. You all will recall that we planned the first few monthly meetings on the board in that first one. We've got to get those meetings for November and December on the calendar.
Yes. This is Lydia. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I sincerely appreciate you making time for these calls and for the work in between our meetings. I know it's been a lot of reading and a lot to digest, and I'm thankful for everyone. I know that November and December are often very rough months to schedule in, and so please do, as you look at your calendars and answer the doodle poll, do your best to accommodate the meetings in every way you can. And I'm certainly happy to help if there's anything we can do, but please respond to those right away once they come out. And without further ado, I think we can go ahead and adjourn our meeting today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.